some of you, all the staff here, there's new staff. Some of you have seen me and know me, and some of you don't know me at all. Welcome to this session. It's one of the most important sessions within our induction programs. We are also at this stage very happy to also introduce Mr. Ntangaze, who is from Planet X, who would be the trainer today. He's also the man that trains our executive management. So you are all in a very fortunate position to have such a person here. Thank you for that. Just a couple of householding rules. Can we please all ensure that your videos are off and your mics are also off? If you've got any questions during the course, please raise your hand. When at that stage, you will be allowed to ask questions. Now, just to come back to the whole process of our performance management. When you started working here, all of us signed a contract of employment. And in that contract of employment, it did refer to performance management. Now, performance management is extremely important for this university. It was launched 2 years ago in full blast. You would have heard something about Project Blue Sky. If you walk into the main building, the first thing you see is there's a man standing there telling you exactly when certain due dates are. Unfortunately, as part of the pandemic, we've been in a situation that we had to postpone certain things. But I think most of you has already signed a performance agreement as well. Today, you will get all the information that you would need regarding those specifics, how to use this performance management, how does it work, and what is the rules governing this. If there is any questions you have for your specific business partners, which is available, some of them are already joined, some of them will be joining during the course of today. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of appointments that we are busy with. Please feel free to contact them as well, or myself, with any questions that you would have that you don't find that you want to discuss in this session. So if there's any questions, any other input, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I will be handing over now to Mr. Ntangaze, who will be the person leading the whole process. So thank you, and then we hand it over.
Thank you very much, Etienne. Thank you very much for a kind introduction. I would like to take this opportunity to greet you all this morning when we are having an induction session for a performance management system. Let me just check before I can go further. Can anyone see or everyone see the screen with just the front page of the employee induction system?
I can see it.
Yes,
okay.
We can.
Okay. Etienne has just basically given us some basic rules in terms of our engagement, which I concur with. We do have an online chat where you can write a comment there. Should you not hear a voice, should you have too much background noise, should you have any other thing that is probably like to bring to our attention, feel free to click that chat button and then you can quickly type. I should be able to observe as we go along. That's number one. Number two, we also do have a facility for hand raising at any given point in time. This is an open session. I would like it to be as interactive as possible, notwithstanding the fact that we can't obviously see each other as Etienne has requested. Normally the issue becomes a bandwidth when we're all using our video facilities, then it consumes a bit of it and then it can stagger or disturb the audibility of our engagement. So that's number two. Number three, obviously if people probably can mute their mics, I've allowed everyone to mute and unmute. So that means you can keep your mic down in terms of audio, and should you want to obviously a particular comment, you can unmute yourself and do the same. Now, this session is recorded. As we speak, we are recording it. That means definitely copies of it will be available to all of you in a couple of days or so. So that should you want to replay or go back and recheck what might have been said, articulated, can be seen. Whilst Etienne was just doing an intro, I did show a bit of a short video of myself on the screen. So I'm not a computer nor a robot. I'm a real human being. So, and that means we can certainly do an interactive session as we go along. So I do know that, and I notice some of our colleagues are joining us as we go along. So I will be allowing them in as they knock at our gates, at our door, to ensure that we move along smoothly. So in terms of housekeeping, let me just make sure that we are all pretty much seeing the slides so that we can start with our session. Okay, let me start by doing a brief intro about the company I'm representing. The company I'm representing is Sobeto Consulting. We are a business specializing in providing human capital consulting services, and we have been in the business for more than 11 years. So we are quite excited to partner with the University of Zululand in engaging on this particular milestone of conducting induction session. And I can mention as well that we have done some work for the university over the last couple of years, and I'll share that as part of this context of this workshop, so that at least we are able to see how best we can obviously add value in terms of the university environment. On the screen, I'm showing our partners that we engage with as part of the journey to provide services, various platforms and various other environments where we are able to assist you in terms of engaging on issues of human performance and human capital and HR in general. Okay, about the facilitator, briefly, just so that at least you can get context of who you are dealing with. Stembiso Njangas has been involved in the business. Currently is a principal consultant of Sobeto Consulting with more than 24 years experience in various industries, of which 15 of these years has been core within the human resource environment. There have been a number of roles that one is occupied during the span of the career, notwithstanding the fact that as a consultant, you tend to fit more onto what clients require you to fulfill, deliver, or provide. So, but in the space of human resource management, it has been my forte, basically. Done a lot of consulting work, done a lot of project management work, done a lot of facilitation, training, part-time lecturing, as well as skills development with a number of other high institutions within the country. In terms of involvement with the university, since the inception of this leg of performance management 2015, that's when we started to engage pretty much at the early part when we were formulating the performance management system as the current version that currently is in use. So pretty much we are quite involved, we are quite familiar, and we are quite excited to see the adoption of the performance manager system to a stage where it is at within the university. So our contribution can certainly go a long way, and we do believe this particular session we're holding today will obviously be of value to all participants and optimize the adoption of performance management system within the university. Now, in terms of the times for the day, as you can see on the screen, this is a agenda guiding us in terms of our key times. We started slightly early as opposed to 9 o'clock exactly. So that means we have earned a bit of mileage in terms of the starting. So there's going to be 3 sessions if I were to highlight them in key. First one will be the introduction session, setting the context and leveling the playing fields. That will be going until 10:30, where we're going to take a short break, body break, and then after that we'll resume session 2 until lunch hour, which is 12 o'clock, and then we're going to take a 30 minutes break. And after the lunch break, we're basically intending to embark on the practicals side of this workshop, where we're going to be working with some of the tools, working with some of the templates, and ensuring that we at least navigate the process that will allow each one of us not only to have a good picture, but also to understand some of the key details of embarking on a performance management cycle, starting from the preparation of individual performance agreements, looking at some of the performance review or evaluation exercises, and obviously looking at the outcome and how things would be expected to look like at the end. If everything goes smooth, we should not exceed 1500 in terms of the time, and I'm more than generous for us. Should we cover things early, we shouldn't necessarily hold on to you guys to be here throughout the day. It's more a question of ensuring that we cover all the agenda items and be able to smoothly navigate through the parts. Now, I would like at this particular juncture just to allow some reflections or commentary in terms of the colleagues whom we have, so that at least we are on the same page should there be any questions. And moreover, I would also like to invite any other requirements should be of special nature, like one of the colleagues earlier on indicated that she would like to take a early depart to attend another session but join us later. That has been certainly noted, and we appreciate for that kind of information. But let me just take a pause and allow some reflection in terms of the time and operations thereof. Are we all good? Are there any comments or any input into the agenda and timelines, as it were? Okay, I'm receiving an indication on the comments, chat comments, which says we all good. We all good. Great stuff. Okay, let us move on then. The purpose of the workshop. Etienne has done a very brief intro in terms of where the whole thing started. This workshop, as it were, we have actually termed it or called it Induction Workshop, where we are committed and intending to impart the knowledge of performance management to key personnel within university. I do believe most of the people on this workshop today are relatively new employees. I'm not too sure how new those would be, but I guess these are employees who probably have not attended any formal performance management workshop, training session, or induction. So I'm very happy for us to be able to share with you the key knowledge, the historical background, the context, and the intention of why the university is and is adopting this particular discipline. The best practices, I suppose, that are key in doing that. I'll share my own experience in engaging with the university from inception till now. I'll also share some of the best practices from the industry in terms of adopting and executing, implementing performance management system, as well as obviously undertaking day-to-day practices of how best one should be able to conduct performance management effectively in dealing with some of the subordinate and some of other staff members. Moving forward, we'll then be able to capacitate personnel so that they can be able to roll out this in their own respective areas. Now, what is very interesting is that, and I'm not too sure, probably we can get a bit of a feel as we go along. Do we have any line managers in our midst? In other words, do we have any personnel who have got responsibility to manage some of the staff members within the university? If I just can get that by virtue of indication on the chat to say yes, I would just want to get a bit of a feel, and if yes, to what extent, so that at least we'll be able to gauge onto that element of saying, as a manager or as a line manager, what becomes key responsibility or expectation from you? I can see a yes coming. If I can get some indications more so that at least I can be able to have a very good understanding in terms of the representation that we have. In a number of cases, particularly within a university where we've done workshops of this nature, it tend to happen, and not that it's unique in any case, but it tend to happen that other employees will say, I'm good with performance management, but my line manager probably on a different instance or different scenario, he or she will say, I'm good with performance management, but my employees. So again, if we're all in the same room, I will be keen to know what has been some of your experience so far, regardless of how long you've been with the university. What has been some of your experience in terms of observing the adoption of this discipline within university? Anyone who likes to comment on that? What have you observed within the university? You can unmute yourself when you're just making a comment. What have you observed within the university in terms of the adoption? Has there been any signs of showing that the university seems to adopt this pretty much more actively or more formally, or any other comment you might contribute on?
This is Namaswazi. Yes, I'd like to comment that I think that the institution is doing a great job in terms of the adoption of performance management. Because even my HOD consistently would remind me that whatever that I'm doing or achieving, I must make sure it's in line with my performance management guidelines. So for example, if I have a set goal for the next term, whether it's writing a paper or it's going for certain conferences and so forth, it would always remind me to ensure that I record it somewhere and I keep records of it. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Nomaswazi. For how long have you been with the university?
I've been here since 2018, but I got permanent this year.
Okay, awesome. Great. Thank you very much. Any other comment on your experience, observation in terms of the adoption or the visibility of the adoption of performance management within the university? Okay, it's a bit of silence there, but it's okay. Let's move on. All right, I see the comment. I will interact with them just to see whether I can. Yeah. Oh, okay. So one is saying only the first month, so not able to comment given the limited period. That's okay. The university has also prepared what we call a project management reference guide. Apologies for the spelling there. Actually, my keyboard is missing some keywords, so sometimes when I type it skips them. So I didn't necessarily observe that before I flagged the screen. But the university has actually prepared a performance management reference guide. As part of the preparation of this workshop, I had requested that should be shared with you. Let me just check whether we all have a copy of a PMF or PM reference guide as it was requested to be shared, so that at least we can just have a very high level overview of what it consists of as a tool that is meant to be utilized by all the stakeholders. At least we should be able to be familiar as to what it contains. Anyone who has not received a copy of the PM reference guide?
I think everything was sent out by Shandu yesterday afternoon. So if there's someone that's not seen it, they can just go back to the email that Mr. Shandu sent out late yesterday afternoon.
Okay, let me just take a couple of minutes just to position it. I do have it on my screen being shown. Let me just check whether can you all see it. Can you see it, Etienne, on your side?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm not going to go through on it line by line, obviously. Just want to position this particular reference guide. The university has adopted a model of using PM, Professor PM or Prof PM in short, as a leader of the adoption of performance management system within the university. And I'm sure you might have seen him in some videos. You might have seen him in some pictures, as Etienne alluded earlier on. So basically, he's some sort of a guiding light in terms of what things that we probably need to know. And the intention was to provide some much more animated inserts or articles or even videos on Prof PM so that you can be able to engage with Prof PM. So in the main, it does provide the definition of terms, which we're going to look at them at the later stage. It's obviously provide various sections. If you look at the performance reference guide, it has been designed in such a way that you can use it with very limited external assistance. Part of our course and our workshop as we're going to be driving have taken a much deeper content from it. So if you have that as a copy, obviously the slides that are going to be shared or being shared today will also be made available to you at a later stage. So the tool should be able to provide you or give you all the necessary tools and ammunitions you need to engage on this subject matter in terms of performance management. Now, there are two key sections on the guide. The first one is theory, background, and context, which we're gonna look at. The second one, which I'm just quickly going to, section 2, is dealing with practical issues in performance management. As part of the designers of this tool, we thought it might be imperative to offer some of the scenarios, because we already know by virtue of popular questions that we had gathered, as well as information and content we have obtained through PMS delivery surveys, some of the key questions and challenges that the university personnel were highlighting. So Prof PM therefore becomes a key person to address some of those. So if you just look at on page 29, it's just a scenario with a bit of context, and we can look at some of these. The question is, where should we begin in dealing with employee performance management? It's quite a common question, and it's a very fair question to ask as well, and Prof PM then does provide an advice. So each and every question has got a bit of context, because again, we do know that we might come from different backgrounds in terms of understanding performance management as it were. So in the first context, as we look, a manager and employee are not sure, both of them, as to the exact starting point in embarking on the performance management activities. So they understand the process by virtue of it being exposed either through an induction or any other form of engagement, but they practically have never been involved in the exercise, and therefore they want a bit of advice as to where to start. Now, that's part of section 2, and it does provide quite a few scenarios, and they are by no means exhaustive, but they are very key, at least to set certain structured way of engaging. And then Prof PM will come in with an advice and say, acknowledging exactly where things are, let me just provide some advice and be able to take you through. So in this particular case of a question being asked, the response from Prof PM start by saying some elements of performance begin long before an employee is appointed in particular position. And this is informed by the way in which a job advert is prepared, outlining exactly what are the key requirements that include the KPIs. So KPIs becomes very important, but because we are looking at a bit of a higher level, let us break down the activities in terms of where exactly it will start. Then Prof PM will move from there in terms of guiding some of this. So if you move using this PM guideline, then you'll be able to see some of this, but we're gonna come back to it at a later stage, especially after lunch, when we come back to look at the practical exercises, then we can zoom into that quite strongly and be able to address these key aspects of the subject matter. So performance management reference guide is a tool available for you to be able to use in your convenience, and I'm sure you'll find it quite handy and as well as useful in your time with the university. So let us look at the background of where the whole journey started. So performance management is not new at the university, and I do remember when we're embarking with the various stakeholders, including at the time, the employee representatives, some of the people were saying, but we had done this before. what is going to be different this time around? Because we've done performance management before. We've embarked on this process. We've tried it. It probably did not succeed at the time. But after the university has taken a very strong relook at the importance and the usefulness and the need aligned with the university strategy, then 2015, they started to rebrand, to repackage, to restructure, and to reconfigure PMS at the university. So that took a bit of time. That included an executive engagement as far back as early 2016. That was followed through by a number of sessions for senior managers that took place mid-year 2016 until pretty much the end. Why? Because the university adopted a phase approach, meaning they adopted the approach whereby they don't want everyone to go deep into this. They rather staggered it from executive to senior managers or senior management, and then from there to other levels of the university personnel. So in December 2017, going forward, the rest of employees were then formally introduced onto performance management system within the university. And that has been reinforced by Project Blue Sky, which took place in 2018, pretty much where all employees, including those that might have encountered challenges, were reintroduced into PMS as we know it. So Etienne spoke about the chart and some of the billboards that are visible within the university, and those were part of the relaunch and reinforcement of performance management. Ever since, the university took a very strong stance, therefore, of saying, going forward on an ongoing basis, every employee who joins the university needs to be inducted on performance management. So this is a continuity and a continuum in terms of making sure that all employees within university are on par with exactly what has happened. Now, university obviously operate on a business partner model from HR point of view, where each and every section within the university has got a dedicated business partner who support that particular area. So part and parcel of what has happened is that the business partners were trained and capacitated on PMS. So that means not only on the induction level alone, but deep when you are on the day-to-day engagement, you should be able to find necessary support from respective business partners. And obviously all line managers as well, as I've asked the question earlier on, if there are any line managers we now missed, it is important that we are able to single out their roles and be able to provide necessary support as what is it that they need to know or to be capacitated with, because as line managers, not only are they supposed just to participate in performance management, but they're supposed to lead the engagement on the matter of performance management. So it's always important for them to be a step ahead of the pack so that they can be able to initiate to avoid or prevent a situation whereby employees tend to come and say, I am ready, but my line manager isn't. So in that particular case, therefore, line managers are given a particular attention in terms of being capacitated. So the intention, obviously, on a continuous basis is that the university from time to time will ascertain, do some checks, do some surveys, do some check on the analysis as to the level of adoption, because part of what the Project Blue Sky had committed to was the adoption of performance management within the university should be 100%. Should be 100%, and that means every employee within the university need to adopt performance management to the greater degree without any exception. So it is important that for university from time to time need to check that all employees, as it were, are indeed adopting this, and all employees are on par to ensure that they are able to embark on this exercise without any issue of hindrance or any negative impact thereof. So I would like to just to take a checkpoint in this particular case to check whether we still are together. Are there any questions at this stage as we proceed with our engagement on the subject? Okay, cool. I will move on to this next section where we talk about the importance of performance management. Why is performance management important? And I would like to ask this question. From where you were used to be working at or where you are from, what has been some of your experience in terms of adoption of performance management? Is this an important part of what you were familiar with, or is it relatively new for you to be introduced onto performance management within your university? Because obviously performance management is not unique to University of Zululand. So I'm now keen to know from where you were at in terms of employment or previous engagement, what have you noticed, observed in terms of performance management level of or adoption thereof from your previous employment or from previous engagement? Anyone who would like to comment?
Please feel free to comment. This is something that you are going to use a lot in future, and we're going to refer to it a lot. So please feel free to comment. There's no such thing as a stupid question. There's only a thing as, why didn't I ask the question at the time when I had it? So please, this is an interactive type of thing. We would really enjoy yourself if everyone can just have a comment.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hi, this is Carol Rasejo. Well, I used to work for government, and performance management was very important. And I must say it was done religiously, where it was done on a quarterly basis. And the nicest thing is we didn't have to wait for 12 months. It was done quarterly. So it actually served a purpose in that regard for me. Thank you.
Great stuff. On that note, if I just do a follow-up question, in terms of objectivity, most people and some of them within university, one of the key points they had mentioned was, but what if this is intended to get some of us? In other words, what if it is done for it to be a witch hunt? So the question is, in your previous environment, what would be your comment in terms of how objective it was being undertaken?
You know, it was based, for me, it wasn't a witch hunt, because I would say it's a witch hunt if it's not done regularly, because this person is sort of like waiting on you after 12 months to understand what have you been doing. So for us, it was quarterly, and I mean, it was, for me, a very nice process, because it got you thinking about your job and how to best improve. So yeah, in my opinion, it wasn't a witch hunt.
Okay. Thank you very much, Resejo. Any other comment? I see on the chat, one of our colleagues says he's relatively new onto it, so he's new onto PM as a discipline, so he probably wouldn't comment at this stage. What are other colleagues saying?
Hello.
Hi.
I'm having technological issues. Etienne know about my issues. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear, sir.
Yeah, in the environment where I come from, we actually had a challenge that it has been used as a tool to get to us. Because, for instance, our managers would actually, instead of using it to beef our competency and skills, but it will be something to sort of put us down, prove to us that we are not as good as we think maybe we might be. So it then goes to a point where you are not allowed to manage, and you are part of the line or chain of managers, and you're supposed to manage a certain section, and it is then utilized to also deny you the opportunity to get increases when that time comes. So I hope and believe that Unizulu is not using it for that purpose, but is using it to ensure performance and enhance the development of employees. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sehloho. A very important comment there, and at the tail end of your narrative, because indeed some of the questions were asked during the implementation of performance management system as to why is it being done? Because we don't want unintended consequences. Why is the university is intending to be approaching this in a way, in a manner that will benefit everyone? So, but certainly as part of this exercise, we'll get into the details of that, and I'm sure we can obviously make some demonstrations. And I would like you to test whether the way it has been structured, designed, and configured will indeed allow university to manage performance and rather benefit the employees as opposed to do the opposite of it. So, but thanks for that comment. Let me take one or two more observations based on their previous experiences, and then we can steer forward.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, this is Nontokozo Mashia.
Yes.
I am new here. I'm from the university context, though. I was in higher education, where I was, performance management was the culture. It was part of our lives. But the way it was received by academics actually was depending on how you performed in that particular year. If you performed very well, then you would look forward to filling in the performance management. But if you did not perform well, like as an academic, you are expected to publish. So if you do not have publications, that's where actually it becomes a daunting task to fill in the performance management. But if you met all your requirements in terms of publications and so on, you'll always look forward to completing the performance management. So that is how we used to feel where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Nontokozo, because the reason why I'm actually laughing is that I'm thinking as you are talking, there was once of the workshop where the question that was put forward was, in your own view, would you see performance management as a carrot or as a stick? And I would like to pose it to our colleagues to say, how do they see it with their own understanding? Do they see it as a carrot or do they see it as a stick? Nontokozo, maybe based on your own knowledge, based on your environment where you're at, what would be your comment in that statement or in those questions?
I would say it's the combination of both. As I said, it depends on how you performed in that particular year. So it's a combination of both.
So would you also agree then when I say, or when I put it to you that to a large extent, you are in control of whether you see it as a stick or a carrot?
Perfect, you are right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yes, any other comment? Maybe also deep into the stick carrot kind of scenario?
I think, I think there was a comment made, good on paper and poor on execution, as some members of management were not committed to the process. Disconnect.
Oh, yes. I saw that from Malukwini. It can be indeed, and again, probably part of my reason why I was asking whether we have line managers was exactly for that, because if any of the parties, maybe let me paint the picture. We've got executives, managers, line managers on one side, we've got HR on the other side, we've got employees on the other side. Now, all of us are employees, regardless of whether a manager, by virtue of us being employed by university, we're all employees, but there are certain duties assigned to certain key stakeholders to allow this process to move smoothly. There might be one of them who is not executing his or her tasks. Therefore, the process might be just a good paper-based case study, not necessarily good on execution. So part of the reason why this induction is important is to exactly make the value which has been derived from paper to actually be derived in practice. So let us not make it only a tick box exercise, let us make it a practical value-adding exercise. So, but again, and these are kind of things that I believe during this engagement, I will try by all means to demonstrate as to why the university has gone to this length. Obviously, might personally not be there on day-to-day basis when the implementation of the performance management take place, but I do employ all of us, at least if we do all know and familiar with the best practice or the expectations, we'll be able to be good stewards in terms of ensuring the execution. So yes, definitely thank on that one, Malquini. Any other comment? Carrot or a stick?
Well, I can't really say carrots or a stick, but my previous experience was really terrible because the HR partner that we had, and I was working for a research institute. So I felt like she did not understand our objectives of the work that we do as research assistants. She didn't understand when we had to go to the field and so forth. So she used her objectives or what she was expected to do as policing us in terms of performance management. She was policing us in terms of she would look at what time you get into the office, what time you leave the office, and if you're saying you're not coming to the office space, you're working on the field, she would literally count hours for you when you're getting back. And if you come back around 4 when everyone is leaving, she'd be like, but you were gone the whole day. What were you doing? What were you doing? So it was, yeah, it was interesting times.
Very much interesting, and probably when we come back after lunch or so, I'll just use a demonstration to outline the level of adoption by virtue of maturity. For those who have attended, obviously, I suppose none of you have been, but maybe Etienne might remember. We'll talk of a capability maturity model, a model that we employ from normal operations, where we acknowledge the fact that as an organization, you must start from a particular level or particular angle. There are 5 levels, 1 being chaos and 5 being optimized or systematized way. So based on what my colleague has just indicated now, I'm obviously of the view to a large extent that as long as we have started somewhere, let us allow the growth to take shape. So even the HR practitioner might start as a police person, but over a period of time, if the institution is committed to ensure the maturity of the adoption, because we can't start and stop and hope that it will mature on its own, there should be a conscious decision to say, yes, we are starting at level 1, or maybe at level 0.5, or maybe at level 0. And some organizations are starting at minus levels, if there's something like that in terms of the level of readiness or lack thereof. So again, for the university, as we are talking about adoption, we're talking about gradual maturity to an extent whereby one day the university can probably emerge as level 3. That means there's a consistent understanding and there's a smooth operating in terms of performance management system. But indeed, yes, thanks for the comments in terms of what has been provided, and we hope through this section we'll be able to reflect back and be able to see what we can improve on as well. And I'm sure, as you can see on the screen which we have, why performance management? Because those questions of why we're doing it are very important and very essential. And I think as a university, that has to be asked amongst the executives. Why are you embarking on performance management? Now, we had gone through, obviously, analysis, paralysis, and one of the questions I would like to pose, just for the sake of checking, is that amongst the 20-odd universities, if not more, within the South African context, where would you position University of Zululand? And this is not a scientific question, nor does it need scientific empirical answer. It's just by virtue of your own pictorial or contextual understanding. There are a number of universities, and I'm not too sure of the exact number, but a number that I thought I had in the back of my mind was 26 public universities. Correct me if I'm wrong. The question is, where does the University of Zululand fit in terms of the rating by any standard? I'm not quoting any particular publication in this case. I'm just checking and asking, because as part of that very question, the question was, if you are at a particular level by virtue of that rating, are you happy with where you are as a university? So during those engagement and discussions, there was common understanding of not necessarily the exact number, but in terms of where we might be, there was also a common understanding and commitment that we can do better to improve our rating. So the reasoning, therefore, behind the performance management is because it is one of the tools that can assist the university to improve its output. And therefore, by improving its output, it can have a ripple effect or a direct effect in terms of improving its rating. Now, as I've indicated, various publications do make mention of number of ratings for various universities, but for all intents and purposes, if you look at the quantum of all university employees and personnel, 1,200 odd university employees, if all of them were to perform and exceed the minimum requirements, I think you probably can get a picture as to where the university will be, starting from a security guard right at the gate up until the cleaner right at the end, all levels, all stakeholders, and all roles within university. If we can just say, let us improve by 20% in year one, improve by 20% in year two, that means we can start to see meaningful results. Now, obviously, you cannot just say, guys, let us improve, and you hope for improvement. You then have to go down to say, how would I then determine what is the level expected? 1, 2, how would I then determine whether people are indeed performing at the expected level? How would I even determine what is a minimum threshold? Why would I determine what is an acceptable benchmark? So amongst the all systems or mechanisms of measuring and determining and managing the performance of an institution of university caliber, performance management is one of them that focus on personnel. The university's strategic objective has been defined. The university council is expecting the university to achieve certain goals and objectives which are enshrined into the strategic objectives. And I do believe that the university strategic objective is accessible and available for anyone who might like to have access to, so that you can at least see where the university is heading. But the manner in which those objectives need to be executed and be met has got a huge bearing on the personnel of the university. That is why, for the University of Zululand, during the engagement and configuration of this strategy or of this system, of this discipline, it was aligned to the strategic objective of the organization, so that we can be able to all work together towards a common goal. So this is not about an individualistic approach, it's about the institutional focus. The institution is made out of parts, one being the divisions, one can talk about teams, one being systems, one being processes, and obviously one being individuals, which forms part of teams. So at the end of the day, part of the quest of why universities embarking on this process is to ensure that we all pull together. The emphasis is on the improvement of performance, learning and development in order to execute all business strategies and create high performance institution. In this particular case, by focusing on the workforce. And if it means the university is committed and continuously make sure that they embark on this, by all intentions, one day they will emerge as one of the best performing universities, again, depending on the level of standard that will be used to measure. But for all intents and purposes, this system is focused on assisting the university to be the best as possible as it wants to be in the space of learning, research, as well as education. So those are some amongst the main intentions of why the university has adopted this. Now, Etienne, and again, I will check through you as a person who's been part of the coordination, were the policies and template distributed to our colleagues as part of the preparation of this workshop, so that at least when I'm making reference to some of these documents, at least I've got a view that they do have access, or at least they've got a copy lying in their inbox somewhere. The policy, performance management policy 1, the template, do you know whether were these distributed to our colleagues? Hello, Etienne, or anyone in the session, did you receive an email perhaps with policies and templates, performance management policy and templates?
Yes,
Sorry.
yes,
Yes.
It was sent out yesterday. It's part of the whole thing.
Okay, all right, great stuff. Because these are some of the building blocks of exactly what will make us to at least have a very good framework of why this is being done. Because Tembiso, can say this, but if it means it's not supported by any form of guiding principle, and the policy is one of them, it might be ungrounded, or should I say unfounded. So it's important that perhaps during the course of our session, even though we won't go deep into the policy as it were, I think in most of the questions that might need some responses will have their context defined from the policy. And I appreciate probably when you come back from the break that we might just have a very high level look at the policy as it were, so that at least, again, we're in the same kind of framework as to, in terms of governance rather, why was this done in the way it was done. Okay, so I'll just want to take a moment and look at this short video. I know that we are on a borrowed bandwidth. Sometimes it disrupt, but you'll give me a signal. I'll play a short video borrowing from some of the industry players and best practices as to how they look at this phenomenon, how they define it, and probably how they feel it can be utilized. And then we'll continue shortly after the video. So I'll just check first to see whether the video appears. Number two, I'll just check to see whether the audio of the video comes through to you quite clearly. You can give me an indication as well from your side if you don't mind.
So what is performance management anyway? Well, performance management...
So can I just check, can you hear the video? Can you see the picture?
Yes,
everything's fine.
Okay, great, thank you.
Should be seen as a set of interactions between a manager and their employee over the course of a business year. The purpose of performance management is to focus and motivate high performance. Why is performance management so important? Well, there is a direct correlation between management behaviours and activities, employee engagement, and business profitability. In short, if you want to increase next year's bottom line results, start with this year's management behaviours. The challenge is, it's very often seen as a process, and it is a process in the fact that it's recurring. However, that devalues the key, which is it's fundamentally about the human interaction between the manager and the employee. So what are the key activities that comprise performance management? Well, it should start at the beginning of the business year with objective setting. Every employee should have a set of objectives which align to business goals. The purpose of these objectives is to give the employee clarity about what is expected of them at work. Once those objectives have been set, it's vitally important that the manager and the employee sit down, ideally monthly, and have regular one-to-ones. During those one-to-ones, you would expect to check in on performance against objectives, but in addition to that, the manager should be using coaching skills and giving feedback, and making sure that their employee feels totally understood and has all the skills they need to perform to the optimum. Most organisations choose to do an appraisal of some description, probably twice a year or even in some cases quarterly. It's possible also to give performance ratings during these discussions, which gives a very clear indication of how an individual is performing relative to their peers. To get the best out of your people, it's really important to identify whether they've got any development needs that might help them to be even more successful in their job role. You might meet these development needs through training, but equally they might be met through on-the-job learning, through interaction with peers, or even self-study. Having a career discussion once a year is very important in retaining talent. Just making people understand that you want to know what motivates them will help them perform and stay longer with you within that business. So you conclude the cycle through an end-of-year appraisal, where you and your employee assess their performance against the objectives that you set at the start of the year, and you refocus them on the next year's objectives. There shouldn't be any surprises at this point, because if you've been talking to them on a regular basis, giving feedback all the way, both parties know exactly where they stand, and you know that you achieved the best together. So all of this could sound like an awful lot of work and possibly be a little bit overwhelming.
Okay, so this video just gives us a perspective on what are some of the industry contributors make comments on, and Actors is one of the providers of the solution. So the latter part of the video talks about the system, which we are not going to delve onto for the purpose of our session. However, I think the former part of the video does a very good introductory positioning how and why performance management is rather key and important for institution. Now, in your own probably kind of reflection, the video might have been quick, short, I agree, but what would be some of the highlights that you might have picked from this video, which probably make the mark on your mind as you were observing or watching the video? Any comments on that? The video itself, what might it have provided to you as a highlight of what they are saying or what they've said?
Hello?
Yes, Raseko.
Yes, it is. It's actually saying it's an interaction between the employee and the manager. And one of the things that I captured is that if you want to increase productivity, you need to at least interact with your employees. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Who else might have observed something? Yes, Innocent. You've raised a hand. You can unmute yourself.
Yes, I have a bit of a question though with regards to the whole performance management assessment.
Sure.
And in relation to what also the video has just shown. My question and my concern is you cannot only measure the performance based on the top-up approach or bottom-up approach, but you may also look at the interdependence departments and structures such as, you know, the cross departments that may also influence the performance of a particular person. Then in a case as such, how do we then manage such in terms of how do we assess those other departments that are not within our departments that also plays a huge role or a huge impact in our performance in a particular department?
Okay, the question, let me rephrase it so that I can check whether I understand it correctly. You said, firstly, it might not be only a good idea to determine the assessment from the bottom-up approach, but there are, however, other elements which might be a contributing factor, which includes cross-departmental interactions. And the question is, how then do we ascertain such in terms of management of performance? Is that correct, Innocent?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Okay. Now, Etienne, I've noted your comment. Thank you. We'll see you later. Okay. So if you look at, and we're going to cover that as we go along. If you look at the university context of how performance management has been designed, without necessarily using the word start as indicating the process, but it takes into consideration 3 levels. We talk of institutional level, we talk of departmental level, we talk of individual level. So those 3 levels are taken into consideration. That means in the planning part, there is an institutional plan. That means also there's a departmental plan, there's also individual performance plan. And these were done for exactly that reason of saying, whilst the performance management can be seen to focus on the individual's output in terms of work output, but there are many other dimensions which we also need to look at, because an individual is forming part of the team, as I alluded earlier on, which in this case can be inverted commas or a department or a division or a unit. But that unit, amongst many, they also form part of an institution, which is a university overall. So what would be the relationship in terms of the planning of all those 3 parts? That is why from at the beginning of each and every year, the executive of the university will meet, come up with the forecast for the year in terms of expectation, and the VC will then come up with her own personal performance agreement in line with the institution, and the various DVCs will take a cue from that and be able to translate those to various departments that they work with up until an individual performance plan is framed or is configured or is developed. So in other words, the starting point comes from the institutional focus going down to the individual. However, during the assessment, now at the assessment time, we obviously have to understand how each individual has contributed towards meeting the institutional goal, how each department has contributed towards the same, and obviously how overall university units have actually contributed to meet the strategic objective. That's why earlier on I spoke about the council. So all parties that are party to this design or this configuration does have a contribution that they have to make. Now, that's number one. Number two, just to give you more than what we've requested, Innocent, is that during the design and planning of performance management, we look at, if we then talk about performance, what exactly are we talking about? So work output is one of them. Work output is one of them. But there's also an element of alignment to organizational values. That's number two. Then there's also what we call competencies, behavioral examples. So those are some of the three elements that we discussed during the planning of a performance management system. And the university unilaterally, or in fact, collectively, executive agreed that because we are starting at a particular level, it has focused mainly on the work output part. Now, I can go further to say work output is done in terms of planning between you and your line manager, so as the assessment is done between you and your line manager. However, when you talk about values assessment or value alignment, and you talk about behavioral examples, your line manager alone cannot be a contributor towards that. So the value alignment as well as the competency alignment or behavioral examples in brackets, those require other contributors to provide feedback. That is when we use what we call a 360 review feedback to be able to ascertain some feedback in terms of whether did an individual contribute, did an individual probably align in terms of what is expected in terms of behavior, but also what were the factors, outside factors that might have contributed to a positive delivery or a negative delivery. Now, the other contributors are able to provide such context. So at this particular point, in other words, phase one of the PMS implementation only focus on work output. And again, we can discuss that in detail, but the work output, look at, this is a key performance area. These are the activities you need to undertake. These are the outputs you need to be able to come up with. One of our colleagues earlier on mentioned that the business partner was actually checking them, the time where they were at and stuff. Part of the university PMS rather looks at the output more than the effort. In other words, you might have done something, but if as long as you have not achieved the certain required output, your effort is acknowledged, but it cannot therefore derive the fact that you have performed well until there's a specific output that comes out of there. So with all the three levels that I've mentioned, they require a certain level of focus, of which work output requires you and your line manager, because you are the two of you who understand what was expected from you in terms of output. In your quest of you delivering your work, you might be affected by other departments in terms of their output being your input and vice versa. That is taken into cognizance as part of the work output. So in terms of just building the relationship between individual departments and institutions, we had therefore to segment these elements, and these building blocks include work output, behavioral examples, and value alignment. Innocent, feel free to reflect on this response if ever it does address your question and your concern as you might have highlighted.
No, thank you very much. In fact, you've just shed some light to a number of things that I did not look into. Then I guess there are certain things that then would have to look into as to how then do we develop this key performance management strategy tool to make it better in terms of, you know, including also the 360 feedback review. That is also one of the most imperative things, especially in our organization as well. So, but I think we'll continue having some discussions as the workshop goes on.
Thank you very much, and certainly we will. Let us look at some key concepts that are most familiar. When you talk about performance management system, some people might think technically, not necessarily, but we're talking more the framework, we're talking more the configuration, we're talking more the discipline that include both policies, processes, and to a certain extent, the actual template that are being used, and the IT system that might be employed for the purpose of deploying performance management system within the environment. Some of the key terms that can get the tongue waggling like performance cycle, performance management cycle, and what exactly is that? And this describes the phases through which a performance management moves or navigates, that is planning or contracting. When you, at the beginning of the year, when you plan individual performance agreement, we also call that a contracting period, because we then highlight what becomes key for the employee in that particular period for the year, as well as a review of performance on regular basis. On the video, they spoke about meeting monthly. Obviously, they can probably review it weekly, so not weekly, quarterly, and probably make sure that there's a total outcome for the end of the year. And obviously the annual career assessment, amongst other things. So if you look at some of these, different organizations use different terminology, but the whole cycle starts from planning to the actual aggregating of all performance scores at the end of the particular calendar year, or at the particular performance cycle period, as it were, for the institutions. An agreement, IPA, is a term that has been coined for the university individual performance agreement. Is a document whereby both the line manager and an employee will agree onto the priorities of what essentially need to be focused on for that particular year. On top of my head, I can just highlight that the agreement can be very dynamic, and from time to time it can be amended to ensure that it allows both parties to benefit from it. But on top of it all, one element of an IPA will be KPIs. In other words, what are these output areas that an employee need to focus on? Number two, what will be the activities required to perform or achieve those outputs? Number three, what are the resources that are needed? And these resources might vary from infrastructure, from tools, from financial, and all other forms of resources. But it doesn't only end there. It also highlights and reminds employees about the value system. But most importantly, which I suppose is underrated most often than not in performance management system, is the discussion on the career development of an employee. That is why the IPA for the university has got a side or a section which talks about individual performance or individual performance planning, or personal development planning rather, where then as part of the agreement, now that we know what is expected of me or us or you for the particular period, there should be some intervention that the university can discharge or provide to allow me as an incumbent or an employee to develop or prepare myself so that I can develop certain skills required to execute some of these jobs. Not everyone will be ready to meet the challenge or to meet the requirements of the job. That is why it is always provided that as part of this engagement, we need to be able to make a provision to say, hang on, here's an agreement in terms of what is expected, but also here's an agreement in terms of how we're gonna prepare you to be able to meet the minimum requirements of the job as it is outlined to you. So PDP, as it said, personal development planning is an important part of performance management. Therefore, it is an important part of performance agreement right from the beginning, because we don't want any surprises. Performance reviews, these are structured processes where staff members' performance is being reviewed. For the purpose of the university performance management cycle, I think the agreement was twice a year, mid-year and end of year. So there's only 2 performance review processes, and due to the limitation of, not the limitation, rather, due to the disturbance of COVID, university has to make a pronouncement as to how then the 2020 performance cycle will be dealt with, because there was a bit of a disturbance during the year. So it might not necessarily allow us to have the 2 terms, mid-year and end of year, for obvious reasons, but the proper pronouncement will have to be communicated so that we can remove all the speculation and assumptions, as it were. Now, C talks about performance appraisals. Performance appraisal goes beyond just a review. Only after the review has been done. Now, most often than not, and again, the reason why performance appraisal becomes key is because in some cases, when people think performance, they think the implication. They don't necessarily think the actual process. They think, okay, so if I perform, then what? But if you have performed, then it's okay because you've been employed to perform. However, the university, like any other institution, can embark on the process to reward those kind of performances that they see fit to reward. And we've made mention of the legislation as part of the framework, if you look at the policy, it does talk a bit about the Labor Relations Act, as it were. If you look at Schedule 8 of the Act, does make mention that if someone does not perform to the required level, that person can lose his or her job, notwithstanding the fact that the formal process of engaging in terms of dealing with performance issues has to be done. But there is no foregone conclusion, nor any expectation that should be borne in mind to say, if I perform, therefore I should be rewarded. Now, I'm just trying to talk about the point of performance appraisal, because I do know, even during the engagement and discussion with various stakeholders, it normally jumps into the engagement of discussion to say, okay, if I perform, then what would I be rewarded with? The point is, you are employed as an employee to perform. You are given, and I'm going to use a loose term, the remuneration for your duties as an employee in this institution. But if the university sees fit that beyond the normal remuneration, they will then create an appraisal regime where certain employees who are meeting certain minimum requirements for appraisal can therefore be appraised accordingly. And I would like to take a pause just to check whether are we still on the same page in terms of that, talking about the appraisal as it were, and then we can look at the performance rating scales as well as scores. Any comments on the basic definitions as they are enshrined on the screen? And also to mention that in your reference guidebook, these terms are also covered there, and many others that we have not yet covered on the screen. Any comments on the terminologies that we have looked at and your understanding, perhaps to check whether we're still on the same page? Are we good to take what we have looked at as terminologies as what can guide us in terms of the engagement within the university? Just an indication so that I can see whether you're still there, please.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, great stuff.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what happens, or what could be the implication on the absence of performance management? Let me just go one step back. I've moved too far. Okay. In organizations where there is lack or there's a complete absence in terms of performance management, what are some of them that can be observed in those institutions? One of them is lack of uniformity in management of employees. In other words, boiling water. One team or one line manager, one department focuses on X, whilst other departments and other line managers are focusing on Y, and so forth and so forth. That's number one. When I'm saying Y or X, I mean in many aspects. It might be the philosophy of saying we need to be at the office, at the desk at 8 and make sure we leave at 4. And that's our focus, to be attending to our desks, which does not necessarily talk to performance necessarily, or which does not necessarily take to output, but probably which is more alluding towards ticking off the boxes. As long as I'm at the office between 8 and 4, I'm good. As to what I do during the day might be secondary. So one department or one line manager might focus on that. But on the other side, I've spoken about the university or an institution having a strategic goals or objectives. It is imperative, if not important and vital, that there should be uniformity in terms of looking at one direction, as opposed to probably look at what I, as an individual, am more orientated to. So if there is no, what you call, focus on performance management within an institution, one of the observations would be lack of uniformity in management of employees in terms of approaches. That's number one. Number two, no defined objectives or outcomes, required outcomes are actually stipulated clearly. That means in some cases, you might find results. In some cases, you might just find arguments and narratives as opposed to outputs and results, as I've indicated earlier on. Now, in terms of trying to make sure that you prioritize the focus of where you're going with the organization, you might find that because we've got limited resources, if some of the resources we have are focused on non-priority areas, it obviously won't affect our bottom line as much as it would if we are focused on certain key priorities. So these are some of the observations that you can start to see in institutions where there isn't a performance management system being utilized. Now, in some cases, even if it means there is performance management system for reasons stated earlier, if our environment is not as matured as yet, you still see some of these. So the intention is that as a university, we want to migrate from some of these signs or some of these obvious characteristics of no performance management, and rather move into a positive of them of aspects, so that we can be able to achieve our institutional focus driven by the strategic objective of the university. So you can go through the list and see the rest of the points. Limited or no accountability, which can be painful at times, no meaningful or no common understanding of performance management, contract not linked to any job profiles. That's obviously quite key and rather dangerous if you're just going to compile a performance agreement without any input from the employee job profile or job description, and lack of structured approach in terms of outlining, looking at the results in terms of those employee performances. Because if it means the employee is not performing, but probably liked by the manager, you might find that he's rather favored, not because of output, but because of favor and preference by the employee, by the manager, as it were. So if you look at the two diagrams in a very probably pictorial way, they just try to show you what could be if it means we do not have performance management system adopted by the institution. Even if it means adopted, but we are still at a very immature level, we can see disaster where you see to a certain extent people are unhappy, there's no level of commitment, there's no support, there's no conscious focus towards a strategic objective of the organization. So that's what we see there is pretty much resembling a disaster. The opposite in this particular case is rather what is desired, because we know that, as we have indicated, resources are of a limited nature. No institutions has got abundance of resources. So alignment, integration, and are some of the key aspects, as you see the guys and the colleagues holding themselves towards meeting a particular objective. So performance management in this particular case, again, proves the point in terms of the adoption that for the university, the intention is not to say we are want to embark on the process of catching, surprising, penalizing people. No, the intention is to enable an organization that can track and monitor performance for employees, departments, as well as an organization, innocent, as we indicated earlier on, to say not only in terms of individuals, but departments as well as the organization as a whole. So that should we establish some gaps, we can be able to proactively take steps to address them, because we want the university to be the better institution that it can be. We just don't want it to be an institution for the sake of institution. We just don't want it to be an employment provider for the sake of, but we want it to be the best which intends to be. So from the benefit point of view, you can obviously look at the organizational benefit, because it's a organizational talks department and institutional wide, but you can also look at the personnel or individual benefit, which talks again to the design and the configuration of this system. It is not by accident that we talk of institutions as well as individual. It has been intended foundationally to look at both of them. So from the organizational point of view, we're looking at promotion of standardized framework for planning. We look at ensure clear outlining of organizational priorities. We look at cultivate integrated approach in terms of organizational strategy perspective. We also look at ensuring accountability amongst organizational leadership. Now, that is not an exhaustive list, but one certainly can say those are at the top of our intention as to why performance management should be adopted within the institution of Unizulu at an organizational level. At an individual level, it facilitates integrated planning at various levels of the organization, for the very reason, Innocent, where you say, yes, I am an individual, but my existence, including performance and output, is dependent on a number of other elements. So when you plan, right from the beginning, when you plan and making certain parameters to say, so for me to perform and produce that output, and that output is defined by a KPI. KPA is what is required. KPI is a level of performance expected. Now, during your planning, those things are already outlined. And if you are not clear as an employee, as an incumbent, or as a line manager as to I will be able to achieve the required level, you can then go back and say, in order for me to be able to achieve that, I need X, Y, and Z. And that X, Y, and Z can be any aspect that will assist and enable you not only just to perform, but to achieve a required level. So facilitation of integrated planning therefore becomes important, because we remove all those known obstacles. We obviously try to identify all those anticipated risks so that we can remove them and ensure the smoothness of operation. So whether I'm at the office at 8 or at 9, the focus becomes the delivery or the output. And I'm not trying to downplay the element of timing and the keeping of time, but I'm just trying to emphasize that at the end of the day, if we are becoming more and more matured, we are able to say, if I deliver A, B, C, and D at a required level, depending on the scale we might be using, will it be sufficient for the university to see that I've delivered? And if the answer is affirmative, then at least you know exactly what is expected of you, and you know exactly what there's a level of sufficient expectation in terms of the benchmark of your performance. So planning is therefore important at the personal level. Framework for structured employee in terms of responsibility. I've spoken about that part in terms of planning as well. Facilitate a platform for employee engagement. Now, I know the term engagement can be seen as a very loose English description or descriptor in this particular case, but in a space of HR or human capital, it's got a very strong meaning. Some research done, I think it was Deloitte 2018, if I'm not mistaken, did a research in terms of human capital effectiveness, where they indicated that organizations that tend to engage their employees to a minimum degree, engage them, tend to see in excess of 20% performance improvement. Now, what do we mean by engagement? That each institution can unpack employee engagement thoroughly and properly to say, for us, employee engagement means A, B, C, D, and E. Now, by virtue of implementing performance management system, by virtue of doing that, you are compelled to engage employees. One, because you plan thoroughly. You also do your homework to articulate what is required. You also set time frames as to how regular you should provide feedback. You also provide a very formidable approach of how that feedback needs to be provided. So that already set some sort of parameters for engagement. That means if it's done properly now, the how part, if it's done properly, you'll find employees being open to their managers. You find managers being open to their employees. You eliminate surprises. We eliminate the so-called witch hunt if it's done properly. And therefore, you are able to get a workforce which is rather more looking forward to come to work the following day, engaged toward achieving the objectives of the organization. That's point number 3. Obviously, we can move further if it's done correctly, objective employee evaluation in terms of performance, and further on provide an opportunity to identify employee performance gaps, which are key. I mean, I do know that skills audit is becoming a very popular terminology or term phrase in organizations, but if you do and conduct regular performance feedback, by virtue of doing that, we are able to ascertain whether is my particular employee reporting to me able to have what it takes to meet the required standard. And we are able to establish employee gaps right there. And the total aggregate gaps established on all employees can be seen in the context of skills gaps within the institution. Obviously, conducting an overall and overhaul in terms of skills gap is an institutional-wide initiative. But what I'm saying and what I'm putting forward here is that if performance management is done appropriately and accordingly, it starts to give us rewards. In this particular case, in our department or in my department, you can start to understand clearly how my employees are, how the level of fitness, the kind of priorities. Let us talk about employee alignment in terms of individual vision and goals, because all employees have got their career ambition somehow. So these engagements we are talking about when we sit around the table discussing feedback also allows us to understand whether there's a job that the employee is occupying in line with the career ambition of an employee. And I'm going to say that very carefully. I'm not trying to say you can then unilaterally change, but I'm just saying it is important to know whether the employee is happy in terms of the job that he's performing, because you can always look at the KPIs that are part of that particular job position. You can also look at the complexity on the activities and the KPIs performed by the particular employee, so that at least the employee can find the proper challenge that can also allow him to grow and develop to be the better person that he deems himself being in the particular institution. So these are some of the reasoning, the benefits, the inputs that actually compares the university to say, not just because we want it to be done for the sake of it, but with some of this benefit to the university and some of this benefit to our employees, we have a good business case here that performance management has to be embarked on, because according to our understanding, there's nothing else that comes close towards giving us this desired outcome and desired output for a university to be able to be better in terms of what it intends to be. I'll take some comments on these and some reflection in terms of the benefits and why performance management is key. The question is, are these some of the bases you can agree to commit to the performance management system as being introduced by the university? Or you probably say, but Stebis, I have my own other intentions or my own other goals that I would have thought would have been considered as part of the reason to introduce performance management within the institution. I would like to hear what will be some of those that you might have, or if it means what we have seen is something or some of the elements that you are certainly able to buy in. I'll probably like to get some as an indication as well from my colleagues. Let us get some reflections just to comment on the benefits, if you may, that we have observed, or some of the elements you would have expected to have been enshrined as the reasoning behind adoption of performance management. Anyone who likes to comment on the chat or unmute yourself and hit it.
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Koza.
Yes, yes, I just want to comment on the issue of the performance agreement, because you are saying the performance agreement is derived from these documents like your annual strategy plan, your operational plan, as well as your job profile or description.
Yes.
Yes, but in some instances, you find that the employees, especially those at lower levels, do not have access to, for example, your annual strategy plan. These documents are not easily accessible to them. So my question would be, as a person at a junior level, how do I design my own performance agreement without taking these documents into account? Thank you.
Great question. To assist, the question is, who should design a performance agreement? And according to what we have said as a basic fundamental contributor is that if you start in a particular position, to a large extent, you are expected or you should have a job profile or job description, as you have mentioned correctly. So that is part of that. You know then what is the job intended to do, what is the position intended to achieve. You probably, depending on the format of the job description profile, you also have your KPIs in the job description. Most job descriptions should also have activities underlying each KPI, because if you're only going to leave it at KPI level, it's too high a level. You should unpack the KPIs with some activities. Why? Because in your agreement, the KPIs are against each activity, not each KPI. So the document, job profile, job description is there as a contributing factor. Your line manager, depending on the seniority of his or her level within the organization, should or would, at the time of compiling or assisting you to compile your job profile, would have had access to the priorities of the university in the form of institutional performance agreement, number one, as well as departmental performance agreement, number two. Let alone the strategy document, because on that one, I won't even comment much. Why? Because that is not a secret document as far as I'm concerned. And I've said this unequivocally in a number of sessions engaging with the executives. Part of the reason why strategy failed is because organizations keep it as a secret. Part of the reason why strategy plans do succeed is because there's a wider adoption, understanding, and also buy-in by the majority of the employees. So looking at the latter, I'm of the view that a strategy plan needs to be shared openly, widely with everyone. So as an employee, no matter how junior or senior you are, you shouldn't struggle to get hold of it, because it should be on shared drives, it should be on portals, accessible. To a certain extent, some organizations share the vision, the mission, the strategic objectives, strategic goals, as well as the values of the organization openly. I remember at some stage within the university, as you drive in towards the gate, there used to be big pillars with each university executive head, as well as a strategic goal for the university. So that's how I understood the openness and the availability and accessibility of the strategic plan for the university. However, obviously, because I'm not part of the day-to-day operation, I wouldn't know what causes a struggle not to access the strategic strategic plan of the organization. So that's just one part. The key part, however, in this case is that sequentially, the university embarks on the process to start at an institutional level, where the VC has got this individual performance plan, as well as institutional performance plan approved by the council. And then she works on with various departments to compile and assist them to have a departmental performance plans. Each departmental head is supposed to share the departmental performance plan with the incumbents, so that when the departmental head is bringing some priorities or priority actions, priority outputs or activities, there should be an understanding that we are prioritizing this year because the university is seeking to achieve this year. So none of these documents I've made mention of should be of a secretive nature whatsoever. And the commitment we've obtained from the university leadership is that they shouldn't be. Now, obviously, the reality is that when you are sitting by yourself, navigating this, you might not find some assistance. Now, all what I'm gonna say probably is, if you can escalate the matter to your head of department or your line manager to request some access, you can be able to find some assistance. Notwithstanding the fact that what I'm also saying is that it is not your responsibility as an employee to initiate the compilation of the performance agreement, because it was not your responsibility to formulate the job profile either. You were employed by the university because the university had a need for a person to execute a particular, or to occupy a particular position and execute a particular function. So at the beginning of each year, the university needs then to stipulate, based on the role you occupy, position, this is what we would like you to focus on as a priority. So can we then sit and discuss whether both of us agree in terms of what we expect you to do, the level of expectation, and the output we expect to be delivered by yourselves. And once you've been able to look at that, you have a right to provide comments, hence it's an agreement. The job profile is not an agreement, it's more one way, but a performance agreement is an agreement. That means both parties need to be able to sit and discuss this with a very strong emphasis that a line manager, with the assistance from HR, need to be able to initiate the process of compiling a individual performance agreement. Now, so your question was, if you don't have access to the rest of the documents, how would you then start? My answer is, you shouldn't even start. However, you should basically respond to what the university would have initiated as a performance agreement in relation to your role that you occupy at the university. Mr. Koza, I would like to hear your reflection on my response.
Yes, I hear you, but just to place on record, I was not specifically referring to this institution. I was talking from my past experiences.
Okay, certainly.
Thank you for the clarity, thanks.
Pleasure, okay.
Okay.
Great, so any other comment? Thanks, Mr. Koza, for your comment there. Any other comment, observation on the previous points of why performance management system or performance management system adoption rather is important, and what are the key benefits both at the institutional level as well as at the individual level? I think that part of the why becomes very key. We know exactly what we are doing. We are going through performance management system as adopted by the university, but the reason is why are we doing it? I think that need not to be shortchanged whatsoever. Any comments of or reflection on that particular point. You can hit the chat button and also make comment there if you feel more comfortable with that. So as part of the compilation of the performance management system, these are some of the aspects which we believe need to be borne in mind. And we do believe, and I know Loise just joined us now. One is that the university has an annual strategy plan, which outlines the clarity of goals and objectives that need to be met. So again, part of what we are saying is that that should be available and accessible by most, if not all, employees. That's number one. Number two, the departmental operational plan. And side by side with the annual strategy plan, as well as departmental operational plan, is the expectation that the institution, at the level of an institution, both institutionally and departmentally, will have plans for performance for that particular year. Job description or profile for an employee is in place, as well as annual performance agreement, which we are talking about, which clearly stipulate the KPIs as well as the KPIs amongst other areas of focus. So these are some of the key elements that enable us at least to have a very good starting point in then navigating the discussion of performance planning, at least within the particular institution. Now, leadership does play a very important role in any organization, or at least it should, because not only should it just be seen as people who are in front, but they also should be seen and understood as people who are guiding the invisible. Not every one of us will probably see by natural eyes the mission and the vision of this organization. Not everyone will probably see some of those goals, but part of what the responsibility of management is to continuously remind us of where we are heading. It might be too far for us to probably comprehend or see or even start to contextualize, but consistently the university leadership need to ensure that it is done on a regular basis. Now, that is why when we talk about performance management, we talk about the focus whereby goals flow from the structural at the senior level down to the mission, vision, and the goals team departments of the university. So all the elements, the department, the individuals, the team, the structure, the strategy, the vision, the mission need to be taken into context, because this is not done with the end goal of dealing with employees. This is done with the end goal of dealing with institutional performance. These are two ends, but employees and individuals are very instrumental to contribute towards a university, its performance and its ability to deliver on expected, at least, goals and objectives. So the point of strategy importance cannot be overemphasized. That's why we start from it. That's why we start from the expectation that there is a strategy plan. That's why we start from the fact that there's an institutional performance plan. So all those are derived from the senior executive level to give us a guide. The rest of the levels, from department to teams, to units, to individual, should take a cue from the strategic imperative that is actually guided by the university, by ensuring that the mission goals and strategy of the organization drive all performance measures and improvement initiatives. Supervisors are able to help employees see how their efforts contribute to the achievement of the university or institutional goals and objectives. So that is very important. Now, earlier on, there was a comment about in some institutions, which is very common, and I know some as well that I've been with, what they focus on is where are you and what are you doing at that particular point in time, versus perhaps looking at what have you done and how has it contributed towards our strategic goal and objective, be it of the university as a whole or at the departmental level. Now, one of the studies amongst many that was done as we slow down towards our tea break, let us look at the study done by Gallup, where they look at what are some of employee requirements when they talk of employee engagement. Like I've mentioned earlier on, if you define employee engagement as an institution, you should also support it by outlining clearly what are these initiatives that you will embark on to engage employees within the university. So Gallup undertook this particular study where they identified a number of factors. Now, factors which are outlined or highlighted in red are the factors which are closely related to employee own expectation. In other words, what is it that employees said they expect from an engagement with their employers or with their line managers, if I were to put it that way. So the ones in red are highlighting that. Number one, to know what is expected from them. And I suppose it's only fair. What is it that you expect from me in a way of clarity, in a way of synchronization, in a way of making sure that not only you as an employer, but also me understand unequivocally what is expected from me. That was one of the points. Number two was to look at tools for them to do the work. Number three was to have opportunities that can allow them to do what they are capable of doing to their level of best, or best levels rather. So, and that is very important. I don't think there's any ordinary employee who wouldn't want to perform at the best levels. So if opportunities are not presented, perhaps it becomes a bit difficult. That is why earlier on when we spoke about engagements, we were talking about a situation whereby an employer needs to understand what an employee is looking for, what turns that employee on, if I were to use the phrase, what makes an employee tick, what kind of activities the employee will be much warm to look at in the constraint of the particular job that they are performing. Number four, receive recognition and praise for doing a good work. And this recognition and praise it can be as merely as acknowledgement, can be elements of certification in terms of awarding certification for best performance, can be some element of trophies. That does not necessarily raise or include or invoke competition, which is unnecessary, but it actually includes or probably invoke or introduce constructive competition. So recognition, if someone has done well, you deserve to give that person that indication. And by sitting with them and say, Stembiso, Tom, or Mr. Koza, or Philip, you have done exceptionally well. I know I put you in the deep end. I think you had outdone yourself. Thank you very much. University does appreciate. And it does not always have to come in a form of material stuff. And I'm saying that not necessarily what the university is saying. I'm just saying recognition is an important part of one's being, and therefore one's level of satisfaction can be derived by virtue of that giving feedback. One gentleman who used to work in the army, he spent the time in the army for a very long time. He used to say, so you must know, feedback is a breakfast of champions. Feedback is a breakfast of champions. And I asked him, Corey, what do you mean by that? He said, for a champion to be a champion, not only does he need to just perform, but he also needs to be given that feedback that he's actually doing quite well in the midst of the activities and the quest he's embarking on. So recognition, therefore, is necessary for people to be able to feel good about themselves, at least know where they stand. To see and value, to be seen as and valued as people, not just as functions. So when people are not performing, they are shouted at, they are pointed fingers, they are being blamed, but if they perform, no one says anything about it. I'm just saying, point number 5 suggests that according to this study, people felt that as long as they can be valued as people, therefore they will feel good about being part of the system, not just as machinery. Number 6, to have someone encourage that development. It doesn't matter which level you're at, there's still an opportunity for you to be developed. Even managers who are managing and leading other people, they still themselves need to be developed. So someone in any sphere of work might need to have that kind of a mentor, might need to have that kind of a coach to assist him in terms of encouraging him or her to develop. The sky is never any closer than what you think. To have a point, to have their opinion count, to have their opinion count. That's why organizations do a number of surveys, climate surveys, from time to time to just check what people feel and how people do in terms of what they feel need to be considered. And obviously organizations, when they've done the survey, they need to demonstrate that they've actually taken into consideration some of the input, either during the year or during the quarter, half year, or any other time. Obviously, during the engagement session, when feedback is provided, some of that opinion is also welcomed in one way or the other. Number 8, to feel that what they do is important and worthwhile. Obviously meaningful work, that what they do. If it means you can see the contribution that we have made that has got a far-reaching fact or the impact to the organization, you might feel that at least you have contributed toward the legacy of the institution, as it were. To have co-workers who are committed to quality work, to have positive work relationships, to talk about their progress and receive feedback, to have opportunities to learn and develop. So these are 12 key points that, as you might notice, came out of the study. When we define engagement, therefore, one needs to look at what are the key pillars that are going to be the building block of the engagement for the institution with our employees, because that becomes key for us to at least to make sure that we're able to feel the heart of our employees. We can know when they still breathe. We can know when they do not breathe, because probably they're suffocating for any other thing that they're probably happening, or if they've switched off because they're no longer interested, we need to know. So engagement therefore becomes key. So performance management as a platform allows such to be done in a formidable way without taking additional time from any parties, because engaging amongst employees as well as line managers is also necessary for reasons stipulated above. So I'll take a checkpoint here in terms of comments and questions, and obviously acknowledging the fact that we are at 1:30. We then probably need to take our short body break or tea break, coffee break, water break, or any other breaks that we might need, and be able to be back. So let me just check first before I can allow for us to disperse for a short while. Are there any other comments, observations based on what we've covered so far? Any aspect of what we've covered so far? Are we good?